Hello to everyone in the internet, and you are watching The Young Globalist. Alright everybody, you worried about Japan sometimes? Because I sure am. Japan's Minister of Cybersecurity has never used a computer in his life. In fact, 68-year-old Yoshitaka Sakurada has been in the Office of Cybersecurity for maybe a little over a month after a major cabinet reshuffle of the Japanese Empire's parliament. Yeah, I'm worried about Japan. Between their current empress wanting to dump what's left of the Fukushima into the ocean, and having an apparently incompetent cybersecurity minister, I worry. I really do. Moving on. Denmark withholds foreign aid from Tanzania for human rights violations. Yes, you heard that right. I read it correctly. For my little bullet points. These notes exist to keep me from rambling. I tend to ramble. And even then it doesn't always do its job. But Denmark. Way to go. I've always kind of liked Denmark to some extent. I've appreciated them over the years. And now that appreciation has jumped up by a lot. By fivefold. And the World Bank is following suit with a $300 million withholding for Tanzania's foreign aid after they denied pregnant girls access to school, as well as its crackdown on gay people, including gay U.S. residents who are legally staying there. Tanzania is a piece of shit country. They're getting their just desserts. No more foreign aid for you assholes. You get to stay in the third world until you learn your lesson. Moving on. The Czech Republic is staying out of the EU Migrant Pact, the recent deal they're signing, because their vetting process is so poor. And as we saw yesterday, their process is deliberately poor. The NGOs are literally trying to help every single migrant come into Europe. All of them. And that's what they... And check out what they did to Germany when they globalized it. It's the globalist politicians. They're the ones behind it. It's the fucking globalists. They want to create a world where there are no countries and no borders. They just want us all to mix together. Which is not only unnatural to an extent, but it's also unhealthy, and it destroys entire nations and cultures. It'll be the end of the human race. Because I'm a race skeptic, in that I don't think that we can truly get along 100% beyond simply live and let live. Now, say a white man and a black man raised in the same culture, they could probably get along on most things. So that's a little different. But with someone from another race, from an entirely different country, and yet the EU expects that they'll just magically get along. Yeah, right. Especially if they're Muslim. Definitely not. Their values are completely different from ours. They're bound to rub against one another badly. So if the Czech wants to stay out of the Migrant Pact with the EU, then they're smart. There's been a number of EU countries that have formed a minor coalition within the EU, led by the aforementioned Denmark, who have basically been like, cut it out with the migrants or we walk, basically. Anyway, moving on. So 17 Saudi officials have been sanctioned by the Trump administration over their part in the killing of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi. These guys have all but been confirmed, and it's still an alleged claim. But it's still solid that they could potentially prove it as being a thing. And therefore they're already getting sanctioned over it because, well, it's a big deal. Murdering journalists. Murdering journalists for the sake of murdering journalists for the sake of suppression. Yeah, murdering journalists, making fun of my own slip of the tongue. Hey, if you can't make fun of yourself. So they're getting their asses sanctioned by Trump. He may be premature. He should probably withdraw the sanctions until they get a certain confirmation. Otherwise, he could cause an international incident. Moving on. Terrorists plotted the Melbourne CBD attack in Melbourne, Australia. And they planned it with things that they bought at a hardware store. Including some nail guns with actual gunpowder. What? Why do they have nail guns with actual gunpowder? That seems screwy. I mean, how is that even remotely necessary? I don't get it. But yeah, apparently you can just go into a hardware store, buy a bunch of tools and shit, and use them like weapons, and it makes little to no difference. What the fuck, right? Yikes. Well, thankfully several of these guys have been arrested and are on their way to prison, but still. What the fuck, man? Oh, what are they going to do now that they've banned the guns? They're going to start banning tools? Oh, yes, it's always the weapons' fault. Anyway, moving on. Mike Pence says U.S. not wanting to control Indo-Pacific region, just interested in its future. Yes, just keeping its interest in the future of the Indo-Pacific region. I know Mike Pence is right for once. In spite of being the worst half of the Trump-Pence team. Essentially, Mike Pence wanting to, electrocute gay people. And, all that. The conversion therapy. Among other things. My opinion of the man is extremely low, although it's risen a little bit after this. He specifically mentioned something about counter-terrorism in that reason. Which would aid in the North Korean situation. There's apparently going to be several meetings taking place in the future. With Trump with Kim again, and then Pence with Putin. Watch Trump negotiate the North Korea situation for a second time. It'll be amazing. Watch him manage it for a second time. And then the lefties try and claim, oh, Trump failed. They're still going to do it. Even though, the data says the opposite. They just can't accept the idea that he does anything good for the country. So I'd say that the Indo-Pacific region is quite important. But choosing a stance of relative non-interference... Good on you, Pence. Moving on. Trump is endorsing a prison reform bill that has been sitting in the House of Representatives for a bit. It was proposed, but no one gave it enough attention. But now he's endorsing it and pushing it, which will probably end up getting it passed. Trump will give it plenty of attention, and people will consider it and decide it's a good idea. This bill would expand the role of rehabilitation in prison and create job opportunities for post-prison life. Now, here's the thing about prison in this country. most prisons don't care about rehabilitation. Prison is basically slave labor, is legalized slave labor. A prisoner is essentially a slave who can work for little to nothing, like they would in a Chinese communist sweatshop. We have our own sweatshops, they're called prisons. But there is some sense of rehabilitation that actually takes place for minor offenders or for moderate offenders. But prison is often life-destroying for them, which is why pushing this bill is a good idea. Anyway, moving on. Michael Avenatti is getting out of jail on a $50,000 bail for a domestic abuse charge, which he claims is false, but it's probably actually true because the alleged victim had bruises all over her body. And I suppose, yeah, you could use makeup and make fake bruises and shit. But the thing is that a bruise is a very hard thing to duplicate. You'd have to have a really high-grade makeup kit. And even then, I think a trained criminologist would be able to figure it out. Plus, you know, Michael Avenatti is such a piece of shit human being that it's probably true. And I mean, he's the Stormy Daniels lawyer. With that nonsense. The fake claim against Trump, so go figure. It's probably just another scumbag lawyer who gets away with whatever just because he's a lawyer. Hate attorneys. Moving on. So, a federal judge may choose to delay the Florida recount that the Dems asked for because they lost. Because they want to make Florida go blue. They want the whole country to go blue. So their wonder socialism can work. And of course, you know, the federal judge delaying it because I think he's worried. Because anytime a recount takes place, a Democrat manages to win. Obviously, they're going to try to alter some of the ballots to make it look like the person voted blue instead of red. That's the kind of typical scumbaggery they would partake in. And yet they did a recount from the presidential election, and look what that got them. Trump wins essentially twice. So it may not be necessarily nefarious, it may just be sore losers. Moving on. Back onto those meetings over the North Korea situation with Pence and Putin and Trump and Kim. Mike Pence actually is pretty good at foreign diplomacy. That's probably one of his strongest areas. Similar in nature to Joe Biden in his area, strongest area being foreign policy. Again, like I said before, watch Trump negotiate that North Korea thing twice. It'll be amazing. Mind you, I would have loved if a solid libertarian candidate got into office. But I will settle with Trump. He's the next best thing. He's pretty good. With a record low of market regulations, solid economy, and of course the stupid shitstorm of controversy surrounding the man. But let's watch him negotiate the North Korea situation twice. It'll be amazing. I guarantee you he'll manage it. He'll just be like, Kim Jong-un, my buddy, my friend, your people, and my people. We need you to get rid of your nuke program. You're threatening the United States on a constant basis is unacceptable. Forget this. You don't need nukes, my friend. What you need is a good economy and a prosperous nation. You don't need nukes. Okay, Mr. Trump, you convince me. We shake our hands. You know? To any of you Asians in the audience for that accent, I apologize. I was attempting to be humorous. I wasn't in any way aiming to be offensive. I was just being humorous. Little joke. Anyway, that's all, folks. Tschüss.